we're going to tackle these things. Everybody has a different name for them. Fender extensions, headlight buckets, headlight, whatever. These things here that are made out of pot metal that always break, they bend, they get in bad shape. But we're going to talk about these, and there's a way we can fix this without fixing it. And some of you guys are going to say, "Oh no, I'm not going to do that. That's kind of a hackery type of thing." Well, what I'm going to do is kind of a non-standard repair, but it will result in something that ends up being a stronger mounting than it was originally. And that has to do with this particular joint right up here, which is, you see, is broken on this one, and it generally is. Don over on Don's Manufactory did a really good video using Muggy Weld to repair a whole bunch of this stuff, and I think it's been a day or two since I've seen it, but I'm pretty sure he repaired this, and I think he actually made some of these holes smaller and some things like that, and did a great video on that, and it worked really well for him. I have no complaints about that at all. I'm just going at things at a slightly different angle, so it's just something else to think about. So the issue is that this thing breaks all the time. Okay, now just imagine on this car you've got a fender that's going around here. You've got a lot of weight out here, and then just imagine the other stuff is in here. Well, you've got a lot of weight out here hanging out in kind of free air in a way, and this stuff is bouncing up and down going down the road, and there's a lot of vibration. Well, that is not a whole lot of support right there. It really isn't. So I'm not really fond of that. I don't care how if that was like brand new again. It's just not. It's not a good long-term, really sturdy type of attachment. Because like I said, you've got all this, and then you've got the grill assembly across, and you're bouncing up and down the road. It's gonna break. It just is. Now, something else that nobody really thinks about is the fact that this is pot metal. And for you guys up in the Great White North, you have this stuff that they put on the road called salt. Generally, we only reserve that for popcorn and steak here. So when you put salt on the road, you get salt on the car. Well, back then, you'd get salt up here, and this would all get salt watery because, the tire's going to be throwing stuff up there. I don't care if there's a little damper thing in here. That doesn't really do much. It keeps the bulk of the stuff from flinging up against the headlights, so at least your headlights don't short out going down the road. But what happens is the fact that this is pot metal, which is aluminum and whatever they threw in the pot that day. So you have aluminum, you have steel, and you have salt water, which gives you galvanic corrosion. I can't say it today, galvanic corrosion. So what will happen is that if these things are not really painted really well, or you put your screws through and you kind of burn through the coating that's on here, the paint on here, and the factory coating was decent. No arguments there. And even the aftermarket ones that have that brown whatever it is on it, it's a nice decent coating. I would say if you are using aftermarket ones, don't remove that brown unless you have to, because that brown coating is going to help protect the lifespan of this. But what you don't want to do is you do not want to have a connection where you go from, say, the screw to the fender to this. You want to have that isolated as much as possible, which means you want to have, as much of so like you put a voltmeter on there, and you don't want all these things to be conductive to each other. I know that's asking a lot, but you do your best to minimize it, and that means good coatings on everything, including the inside of the hole, and so on and so forth. So that is something that you run into up north when all this stuff will corrode out, and that's just galvanic corrosion. So now I'm going to talk about the fix that I'm going to do on this one right here. This is going to be a fix / Band-Aid / some of you guys are just going to say, "Oh, don't do that. That's horrible." But I'm going to start with this, and this is clamp. So as we can see, we're hanging down a little bit. We're actually hanging down, and then we're hanging out a little bit, because you can see this thing is and this is lined up pretty good on this aftermarket quarter pound fender. Oh, I'm getting those confused again. This aftermarket piece of steel. And now if I put this on the original one, it fits pretty much the same. There are some differences. I'll get into that when we're talking about the piece that goes out in front here. But for right now, I mean, I've got this really simple fix. We come in here. Now, if we just clamp this and we pull this, look at this, we can pull this back up into place. Okay. All right, a little more. That is almost exactly where it needs to be. It's just a tiny bit shy of where that should be. Okay, so that is really, really, really close. In fact, yeah, you could muggy weld that in place and probably be good with that too. How well that would work in place because it's a heat sink of the fender and all that. So now I've pulled that into place. It's like, you know, that's right where it needs to be. That looks good. That's fine. We'll just leave the clamp on it and not use headlights. Now, what we're going to do is we're going to take this back off, and I'm going to get you in a little closer. I'm going to show you what we're going to do because it's a little different than what most people would probably do. All right, well, I apologize for the color of the light, but it is what it is. Now, I don't have enough hands, unfortunately, so let me kind of, hey, there we go, that might work. Okay, so we were clamping right here, and this was pulling this up nice and tight here. So what I'm going to do is, we've got this big flat area right here, this nice big flat area. And then we have this little drop down piece of the fender up here, which comes down just, you know, it's almost an inch really. So we've got this area here. So what we're going to do is we're going to pull this back into place, and we are going to drill a hole through this and then into the fender, the bottom side of the fender here. Don't go all the way through the top because you don't want more holes to fill. So we're going to drill a hole here, and we're going to, you know, get our hole into here, and then we're going to attach a nut to this. Okay, so when we drill that hole there, we're going to take a riv nut, and I'm sure that most everybody's probably really familiar with riv nuts these days. They used to be a very expensive thing to do. I remember when the hand tools were $150 or more for their little hand tools. And you buy a blasting cabinet, there was a kit, and you actually had to buy the tool to put your blasting cabinet together. So I remember those. Now what we'll do is we will drill a hole through this, a hole into here, and we will put a riv nut up into here. And what we're going to do is on this piece here of pot metal, we're going to make the hole just a little bit bigger, so that way we have a little bit of wiggle room. And the other thing we will do is, this has this nice big square area here too. And we don't want to just have, you know, like the factory did, like just with tiny little, now these are not the right screws, I get it. This is what I got on hand that fits, it works. But what we're going to do is we're going to make a square plate to go in here. So it's probably going to be a plate of steel that I will powder coat or paint. Probably powder coat because that's faster and easier. It just, yeah, I can bang that out a lot faster than painting it, and it's ready to go. So I will make a square piece to go in here. I'll probably make one for the other side at the same time because that one has more issues than this one does. So to put these riv nuts in, there are the little hand tools. And now my tool that I use is, this is a little guy that I use. Okay. This is actually a aircraft / military tank truck Hummer. They use them on everything in that part of the world. These are actually, and if you run across one of these things, it's a D100. And this is actually hydraulic, which is really kind of cool. These work really well, and they take a lot less effort than the big bendy things, and sometimes these work in tighter spaces. The only thing I have a complaint with is sometimes there's some positions that these don't work well in, and I can't remember what it is, if it's upside down, or there are a few positions that these just don't work as well. It could be just that it needs a little more oil in it. So that could just be me. The only thing I will say that you want to stay away from on these, other than I'm dropping parts, I mean, this is a great tool because this will do your riv nuts, and it will do rivets up to, you know, heavy duty. No, I'm not talking the cheap rivets, that, you know, aluminum things you buy at the hardware store. I'm talking real rivets, real pop rivets. So it'll put real pop rivets in. The only problem you have with this tool is that it is SAE only in most cases, and especially when you buy this way. And these are the little mandrels. These are the little mandrels that work in here. And if you get one of these things, they do make mandrels that are metric for this. But for the price of one mandrel, I can buy an entire tool that does, a hand tool that does SAE and metric. So I would like to have some metric mandrels for this, but it's not worth it. I would just buy some other tool just to get metric ones. So let me get back to working on some other metal work, and I'll cut some pieces out for that, and we'll get ready to drill that and put that in place and see if it works. All right, so I've got my little piece made here. Now, if you notice, there's only an 1/8 inch hole in here. That is on purpose because I want to stick this into here like that in the corner back there, and I'm going to drill through this hole through here and eventually up into this piece as well here. And it's just easier with these 1/8 inch. My favorite little drill bits for starting holes are these little 1/8 inch double-ended rivet drill bits. These are very short. They're very stout. As you can see, there's very little to it. There's not a whole lot of fluting in it. So these things don't break anywhere near as easily as a standard drill bit. And then the fact they're really short, they're pretty sharp. They are super, super handy little drill bits. You go through a bunch of them just because you abuse them, but they do hold up pretty well. You can get these in all different kinds of steels. These are actually very cheap Harbor Freight ones that I bought several packs of them probably 20 years ago. Still holding up great, and I still have a few of them left. I'm running out now, and there are other sizes of these you can get as well. But these little double-ended drills, just handy, handy, handy. I can pre-drill 1/2 inch plate steel with these things, and they do it just fine because they're so stiff, because the fluting is so short. Anyway, I'm going to get this clamp back up into place, and we will I will get that drilled, and I'm probably going to put this right here first, because pull that in there, and let's see if I can line this all up. Now, a big part of the reason that you need to also kind of pay attention to where this is, because if this piece is sticking out, rolled out, what happens is this little pad is now rolled outwards. Well, if that pad is rolled outwards, that means when you go to put this piece on, you got this little round piece right back here that touches that. So if this is not far enough in, this is never going to touch the fender. And remember, this hits the fender, not so much indexes off of this. It does index on the bottom, but what you're going to see that you're really interested in out here is all this edge here, right around here, is all indexing right off the very edge of the fender. So like I said, if that's sticking out, it is never going to touch the fender and be where it's supposed to be. Bottom, yeah, whatever, it's fine. Alright, so now I've got that drilled in through the pot metal, and I know some of you guys are screaming, "You're drilling holes in an original piece," and like, yeah, I am. Yep, exactly what's happening. So now I'm going to line up with this hole again, and then because I have this all pulled out, and I'm going to have to shove this back a little bit and kind of get where I want to go. And I just want to start a little further back. That way, this piece can always come out. The trim piece can always come out. If it's not far enough back, it will never be far enough back. All right, well, a couple other things that I want to mention here while you're working on these things is that there are locating pins. There's a locating pin right here, and there's another locating pin over here. Now, these index with holes in the edge of the fender, and if any of these you will generally see these little locating pins on here bent up, bent out to where it makes, instead of it being nice and flat, bent out to where it kind of makes a curve, where this thing's been pushed back in there. Because it seems that even with factory fenders, that these pins didn't always line up. So, again, you guys are going to yell at me, scream at me for saying this, but you may have to trim these little nubs off, or you may need to modify the holes in the fender. whatever take you want to take on it. And even on a factory fender, you may have to modify one of these two holes or one of these two pins just to make it fit a factory fender as well. So don't be surprised. Don't be surprised. Now these are 1/4 in here. Something to bring into mind is these are supposedly 1/4 on the originals. I cannot get a 1/4 screw to fit the originals, so I need to do some research on it and figure out if that really was 1/4 in those, because they are not rusty, they are not nasty. It's just a 1/4 does not fit. I need to check like a number 12 or something odd, or 12 or 14, because it's not 1/4 don't fit. I mean, I even started. I could run a tap through there, but it would greatly oversize the hole in it. So I don't know what for sure what was factory size on the originals, that the fenders that I have. Yours might be 1/4. I don't know. So I'm going to drill this hole out, and I'll get ready to put that that riv nut in there as well. And just so you know, for this 1/4 riv nut, I'm using a T-size drill bit. I believe a 9mm will also work, which I do need a good set of metric drill bits, which hard to find a good set here in the US for some reason, despite the fact we use standard and metric for everything. So let me pause and I will go get the riv nut tool and pop that in. Alright, well, I assume you can see that. Now I've got my riv nut tool all set up. And you see the nut is on the end. I don't make it super tight on here. I do kind of pull it in and then I back off a little bit. So we'll see if this is the direction that this thing doesn't like to work. And that's all there is to it. And if you don't have a riv nut tool, I believe Harbor Freight has one on sale for like 15 bucks, and it's a manual one, and you will find them incredibly useful. And also, on the factory fenders, these are little square hole little things that are on here for these nuts. There are square riv nuts if you need to replace this nut on a factory fender. There are square shaped riv nuts that will fit right in there. However, the problem is most of the ones you'll find will be metric. It's very hard to find square SAE ones for some reason. So just keep that in mind. So we'll fit this and see what happens. Alright, well, you're still down there. Now I have enlarged that hole right here that I drilled earlier, a sacrilegious hole that I drilled. So I got my little plate. It's going to go here. It's going to tuck up into here. Come on. All right, so as you can see, we've got this nice big reinforcing plate. There's a little bit of slop in there. I didn't drill the holes as big as you might need for the amount of adjustment, but you can always make the holes bigger or elongate them, whatever. It's hard to make them go smaller, but you can always make them go bigger. So now you can see, now I've got my reinforcement. So let me get you up here so you can see. I apologize if that lighting color is horrendous, because that's just the work light, and they are, as I know, Big Clive hates cold white lights, but that is what it is. If you don't know who Big Clive is, yeah, I figured it out. Now, I have a special hatred for common screws, common headed screws. Generally, in my shop, they end up in the circular file, the scrap file, whatever. I hate common headed screws. However, there are a few that I do keep around because, like, these are quarter 20. I'm not throwing away quarter 20 stuff. I do have a lot of little machine screws that are common headed just because, yeah, they are handy from time to time, despite the fact that I hate common headed screws. I don't like fighting with them. It's a pain in the butt. You can see now, right there, I don't have a screw in there. So let's just stick one in there. Not that this screw is actually doing much of anything anymore, but it is there. Okay, so now I can just keep sucking this back up into place as needed. And I've got a nice big plate here to hold that in place. And like I said, I can play with that, pull it up any more that I want. If I need to do any other adjustments in other places, I can You do have the issue of this fender may not be in the right shape sometimes. You may have to take this whole thing apart at the end, take all the spot welds off, open it, close it to make it fit. You know, you got to do what you got to do. But like I said, this is just a simple little fix to at least get a little bit of you know, pull back up into here, and that is quite a bit more sturdy than this would ever be, and especially when you have this big open area where there's nothing. This is just, as far as I'm concerned, when these things break off here, don't even worry about it. This just doesn't support anything. Don't count on this to support anything. So when I do the other side, and the other side doesn't have this piece at all, I will do the same thing over there, and it's like, man, well, I don't care about this piece over here because it doesn't really do anything. It's not really any major strength or support. It's just an annoyance that when it breaks, that tiny little thing that holds it, and so on and so forth. But now you get the idea. Simple fix. Let's go do the other side off camera in some other day where you guys don't have to watch it. Okay, so I've got my little plate up here. It is mounted into there. Now, it would not also be a bad idea if before you put this riv nut in, that you take another plate, drill a hole in it the same size as the riv nut, put it up inside between this sandwich, and that way the riv nut goes through this thin piece up into the thicker piece of riv nut or plate, and that way it is pulling down a big area instead of just the you know, that little area ring right around that thing there, you know. Yeah, it looks bad, I don't care, but you get the idea. That way you've got a big backer plate up inside there, which is not a bad idea. It doesn't need to be as thick as I did. These things are 1/8 inch thick, if not a little thicker. I think they are a little thicker, but it doesn't need to be that thick. So you could sandwich it on both sides, and that way you've really got a lot of meat there to really hold it really well, and you're not flexing this down to the point where you may pull that inner fender part down to where this is not going up anymore, because you're making the little piece go a dip like that instead of pulling out a bigger area. Just something to keep in mind. You might want to do it differently on yours. You might not want to do it at all and just say, hey, that's just a stupid hack job you shouldn't be doing. But you know what? I don't care. When I see problems and mistakes and things like that, I like to improve them and make them better. Cheap U-nuts on there that I could find, and a really cheap screw. But see, now we're actually on here and we're mounted back on. We're actually pretty solid. We're nice and solid, and we are relatively a little bit of a gap there still, but that's not because of what I did. That's just because this piece needs to be fitted to the fender now, and that's a whole nother bag of worms when it comes to fitting this to here. And I have another one of these that is chrome plated for some reason. A chrome plated one has a slightly different shape to the top of it here. It is what it is. Then I have noticed that this fender seems to have a slightly, seems like more of a crisp edge at the very end here than the factory one I have outside. So it still needs tweaking, but at least I don't have to worry about that piece falling loose or the whole thing dropping down that way. So basically it can pull the fender kind of back where it needs to be in a way, because Macer's not doing this on me. But that's just a nice simple little fix. You can do it to both sides, and hope it helps somebody. See you later.